Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Clovis City Council meeting of February 13th, 2023. We are glad that you are here, whether you are in the chambers or joining us online. Thank you for your participation in our council meeting tonight. I'll call this meeting to order, and we'll ask Mayor Pro Tem Wanatua to lead us in the flag salute.
If you would join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. Ready? Salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Paul. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Baskell. Here. Councilmember Bessinger.
Here.
Councilmember Morningsaw.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce. Here. And Mayor Ashbeck.
I'm here. First up is public comments. This is an opportunity for members of the public who have an item to bring before this council that is not on our agenda. This is the time for you to do that now. We ask you that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. I see no one in the chamber. Anybody online?
No.
All right. Next is ordinances and resolutions. With respect to the approval of ordinances and resolutions, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance. And unless there is a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full, further reading of the resolution shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. That was the abbreviated version of that very long paragraph. I don't know that there's anything that falls in that category tonight. Consent calendar. Next up, these are items that are routine in nature. We vote on them in one vote, and a vote for the calendar is considered a vote for all the items on that consent calendar. There are only 2 items on the consent calendar tonight. Council wishing to pull either of those 2 items? No? Anybody online?
No.
All right, we'll bring it back. Entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under administrative items tonight, thank you for being here, our friends from Boot. Under administrative items tonight, there are 3 items. The first is number 3, selection of SpryPoint Services, Inc. to provide utility billing software and services with an implementation cost of $599,900 and an annual cost of approximately $170,500. And this will be presented by Jeff Blanks, our Deputy Finance Director. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, members of Council. Jeff Blanks, Deputy Finance Director. So the item before you is to select SpryPoint Services to provide utility billing software and services. So I'm going to go into just a brief presentation here. First, I just want to talk a little bit background. So the city is currently using a product called Harris Data Now. It's been in place since the late 1980s, so good 3 decades worth of use from that system. As one might imagine, the software is a bit outdated and has little support attached to it, surprisingly enough. Really a lot of manual processes, paper, little in the way of kind of automation and other features that, you know, certainly customers have been asking about, and I'll get into those in a little bit. Really there's been a need for a while. City staff identified really we need a much more modern and technologically advanced system. So with that being said, we jumped into an RFP back in March of 22 with a due date in April. We did receive proposals from 9 vendors. These were reviewed by a team consisting of staff not just from finance, but also IT and public utilities, as well as we consulted with Client First Technology to help us kind of guide us through this RFP and review process. Proposals were reviewed on a number of criteria and factors, specification of the software, their ability to meet our proposal requirements, of course their experience, overall costs, and a number of other factors. So again, we went through a very thorough review process that included also product demonstrations and reference checks. And after that thorough review and a lot of consultation amongst all the kind of the staff that were involved and our consultants, we identified SpryPoint as really the best fit for the city's needs. And I mentioned both now, but also into the future. We really think that their mixture of technology and services is really scalable also as the city grows and our needs change. They're really versatile and nimble in terms of the technology they have. And we think that's going to be necessary moving forward. So cost of implementation as kind of laid out, roughly $600,000 that's been included in the IT budget for 22-23, and then annual costs approximately $170 that are included in future budgets. I'll note that while it's in the IT budget, it's really paid for by public utilities. So some of the benefits, I mentioned obviously the technological improvements from a efficiency through automation, but really a better customer experience. The customer service, really the online portal, the ability to make requests online, payments online, to get e-bills, text notifications, all the things that you kind of take for granted, I would say, at this point in terms of technology and the availability of it. We want to be able to offer those things to our customers. Also, kind of moving forward, should the city move in the direction of smart metering and having that, the ability to tie into our billing system and also to the customer portal so customers can see live usage information, things of that nature. So just a wide variety of things that we're hoping that this system and really expecting that this system is going to be able to provide the city moving forward that we haven't been able to in the past. So ultimately, we're coming forward with a recommendation to council that we select SpryPoint to provide these services and software. Moving forward from there, it'd be roughly a 12-month implementation process to get it kind of fully online and go live. I'll also note is really kind of the first phase technologically that we're looking at. We'll also be looking kind of moving forward at our finance and HR systems as well. But this was really the oldest and I think the most in need. And so we're very confident and very excited actually to move forward with SpryPoint and get this implemented. And with that, I will take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions for Steph? I knew you had one. That's why I just looked that way automatically.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, with regards to the two companies, this Harris North Star is not Harris Data now.
It's under the same company. It's actually it's Constellation. It's a giant company. They actually own a number of different products. They had multiple proposals actually. So Harris North Star is one of them. Data Now is also one of their products. So it is all under one umbrella, but they are separate kind of standalone products that they offer.
And I know we didn't get a score sheet and how it all, was it close? Was it not close?
It was relatively close. They were definitely one of our finalists, but we felt like just the technological advance, just kind of the back end and everything from a technological perspective, and just what we got from SpryPoint in terms of, again, their scoring on the feature function specifically, the technological background that they have, and also the customer reference and things like that. There was just, the whole package was just a little bit better from a SpryPoint perspective than a Harris perspective. And
our projection with regards to longevity of SpryPoint, because I guess Harris was 1980, SpryPoint, from what I found, is what, 2011, and so a newer company.
Yeah.
Was that a big factor? Because
sure, we took it into account. We liked the fact that they were native to cloud, to do a cloud-based service. So what they've built is built native to cloud-based. We feel like, and that was a big part of it as well, we feel like they're scalable, they're going to be growing with us as we go, and that really from a long-term projection perspective, we felt that they were the best fit in terms of serving us for the next 15, 20, 30 years.
And this is only utilities.
Yes.
So it's not going to PD and their fees and planning, it's strictly utilities. That's
correct. So this is strictly utility billing and then service and work orders on the public utility side.
I guess my biggest thought, and you can help address it, is with regards to security. Yeah. And they spoke only in general terms, and so I wanted to make sure that how secure is all the data with us changing to be more advanced? Sure. And, you know, who is responsible for what? Because our duty is to protect the information of the citizens of Clovis. So did they talk much about that? And have they ever been breached, any of their municipalities or whoever they are? So have they ever been breached, and how secure are we moving forward?
It's very secure. It is cloud-based. It's hosted by them. They are required to be routinely audited and things like that. From that perspective, they haven't been breached. It's the same type of security that's required for all of these kind of cloud-based services. But certainly we went in detail with our IT group and their group in terms of making sure that the security of the information, because of course it is utility information, is making sure that from that perspective that we were completely secure in that way. And obviously there's data breach type of protocols and things like that that we hope to never have to even discuss, but that's certainly all part of this process. But we feel very comfortable and confident that the information that will be stored out on servers is completely secure.
Okay. And I appreciate the fact that in the beginning you said IT was part of the team of looking into this RFP process.
Without a doubt. We always, when you engage on a project like this, and really any sort of software that you're going to bring on board, you want all of the major stakeholders involved, and that certainly includes IT.
And then the annual cost, is that fixed for, is it fixed, and then for how long, or when does it change?
There are annual escalators included with it, which can range anywhere from maybe 4 to 6% roughly. But that's all been kind of built in and kind of expected as part of this. It's pretty standard from a software perspective that you see anywhere from 5 to 10%.
And that annual cost doesn't include any of the tickets that we may, those are separate and above this annual fee?
I'm sorry, what was?
You know how you have tickets in that you have requests for them to help?
Oh, that's
or is that included in the 170?
That's all included as part of maintenance. Okay. It would only be if for some reason we had a specific, say, customization that we were requesting of them. But the good thing about this product, as opposed to a lot of the other products as well, is that it's really built out of the box and nimble enough that you don't require customization as much as you might with kind of an older or some of the other products that we looked at.
My last question is then all the current data, does SpryPoint house all that, or is that something which we will house separately and SpryPoint will just be able to access old?
So there'll be some version of data migration. We'll take a certain amount of, say, live data that we will migrate. A lot of kind of the historical information will stay separate, but we will migrate live information going back maybe a couple years, so that obviously we need a starting point for everybody that's live, and then prospectively will be housed out there.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ed.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Vaughn. Other questions?
Yeah, I just have one. You mentioned that you have ideas of other areas that will be using more modern technology and all of that coming up. Is SpryPoint something that would be able to grow with that projection into other implementations also?
Yeah, that was actually one of the things we liked about them, again, in terms of their technology and their ability to interface with other systems, is when we go to look at, say, our finance or HR systems, certainly the finance side of it and the ability for it to interface, that's what we want. And so they would certainly be able to tie in, I think, to any system that we would potentially be looking at moving forward.
Oh, Matt?
Yep. Just a quick question on the contract. In reading the contract, it says it has the 4 to 6% escalator in it, and then it's on a 12 or an annual basis.
Yeah.
In this first contract, are we locking it into 3 years or 5 years at the 170 rate, or is it just the 1 year, and then you got to go
the 1 year, and then we would go, right. So we'd be looking at just the 1 year, 170, and then we would be adjusting from there.
And just a couple other comments. Vaughn took all of my questions. I think the safety piece, and I am not a technology guru, as you all are clearly aware, but I think that I was surprised it got so little mention in here. And on page 6 of their statement of work, they talked about the guiding principles of SpryPoint, and they didn't call out safety. And I found that a little odd. Now, they talk about quality, and maybe in those words are safety, but I was along the lines of Vaughn in terms of data and data breaches, and this is a Canadian company, if I read that right?
Yes, it is.
I don't know this, are the international rules of cloud computing, safety, blah, 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 the same? So what our standards are in the U.S., we would expect Canada to deliver that as well?
Yes, and they would need to abide by anything that we would require as a municipality in California as well.
So I think it's probably not going to go in here, but I think just what I've learned in healthcare, data breaches are a challenge. When they occur, what's the obligation of Spry Point? What's our obligation? How long does City of Clovis data remain in the Spry Point cloud universe? So I would have felt a little more comfortable with more on their safety. So right now you're nodding and you're assuring us that all of those aspects are attended to, but it would be helpful maybe in future contracts, especially this sort of conversion, right, to address that more directly, because I think we are all concerned with that over time. So I wanted to kind of underline that. And then I also wanted to know about other functions that get bills. So HR doesn't get a bill and finance doesn't, well, you don't. What about pet licenses and building permits and other things that are sort of bill-like? Do you see it expanding into that kind of work?
We've looked at other things. So certain ones are already obviously covered by other platforms that we're currently using. Obviously, Intergov for permits and different things like that. We have kind of separate systems that are managing a lot of these. I don't know that necessarily Spry Point can get into that, necessarily get into that space, but other things that we'd be looking at would be along the same lines of what we're trying to do, which is trying to expand the use of technology in a way that's hopefully going to help facilitate these various things that we are tasked with managing or having people pay for or renew. We're certainly looking at it kind of globally as well to try to move in a direction where we're helping to facilitate that more easily through some sort of online presence.
Is there a municipal government platform that does all of the things? And again, just from my healthcare experience, it's always risky when you have 7 different electronic health records into it for a patient, for example, or into a hospital system. Is that analogy hold in local government? So we have this system for permits and this system for billing and this system for dog licenses. Is there any vision of a single platform? Is that out there anywhere?
I think those have been at times attempted. Whether or not they're actually able to succeed, they're so diverse in the needs of all of them that most of the time they get kind of fractured off into niches for this is good at this is good at that. They're not necessarily able to get their arms around a platform that can manage all of the various things. And so not really, there's not necessarily a tool out there that's like, yes, we've cornered all of these markets in one platform. And again, there are also risks in putting all your eggs in one platform when this breaks or that breaks or this breaks, but we need it for these other things.
And just, I think healthcare would tell you that the risks of not having it in a single platform, I get it's not the same, but I mean, just some of those experiences may be transferable to this. The other thing that's not reflected in any of these costs are the impact on staff. What's the staff investment of time, do you imagine, as you migrate data from here to there? And
there'll certainly be some need, staff time, overtime, different things like that will be incurring in terms of implementing this. A lot of the benefit of having their services and hosted and that type is it will be less so on once the data is migrated and things like that in terms of the testing, but there'll be testing, training, some of that type of stuff. But I think once we've moved through that, then the staff ask will be potentially less than it would be for, say, an on-premise type of solution.
Mayor, can I add, in addition to Jeff's comments, is that we're in the process of bringing on one full-time IT person to be able to support the implementation of the phase 1. And this is going to be phase 1 of a multi-year, multi-million-dollar project to try and do what you're talking about, but it's probably not going to be everything. because there's no single product out there that does everything. But the goal is to take it into finance next, take it into HR after that, and then get rid of all these other systems that we've created over the years, because we literally have a system that goes back to the 1980s that we can't support, and it's a phase one of a multi-year, multi-million-dollar project.
Never let it be said that we don't use something till its very last useful day.
Well, it was Rob Woolley as Deputy Finance Director that chose it.
All right, thank you for that comment.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? All right, Vaughn.
Yeah, I wanted to follow back up. I finally found what I saw. So in the service level agreement, it says, page 116, it says, general data protection regulations, Spry Point shall comply with national legislation based upon the EU Data Protection Directive. So in other words, it's not a USA.
Sure.
So that's why I'm trying to go, was that EU, is that much more strict than we have? Sort of back to the mayor's point with regards to they're Canadian, they're abiding by an EU guideline.
Sure.
We're in the United States, and so
and I don't know that I can necessarily speak specifically to all the cybersecurity laws and things that exist, but for all of these companies that exist in the global space, their requirements are fairly stringent in terms of what's required from a data security perspective. These are the types of laws and, that your Amazons and all of your global companies are required to abide by. And so, again, I can't speak specifically to those, but I can say that they're fairly stringent.
okay.
So, and I can add, in working with our IT team on this, their focus was on the security and integration of the system into the city systems, so that not only is the system safe, but also as it interacts with our systems within the city, that is protected as well. So they spent a lot of time looking at that from a staff IT perspective to ensure security.
Thanks again for that assurance.
Coming from me, this is a particularly odd question, but is this a time-sensitive thing tonight if the council was interested in a little bit more on the data? It is so noticeably absent in this scope of work. And I think the EU references, it just makes me a little bit concerned. And again, from me, and it has nothing to do with the trust I have in you and all the vetting that you have done, but I just want to make sure that we're going to spend almost $1 million of the public's money over time, more over time, that we are fully confident in all the things we've talked about so far. Cloud security, data breaches, who retains the data, EU standards versus US standards, because none of that's written down anywhere. And we trust you implicitly, so do not hear my question as not trusting you or the process. But I'm just a little bit wary, I think, of the absence in the document about that. And again, this is from the person who wants to turn off his screen right here, which I'm going to do right now. So anyway, what do you think about that, Jeff?
I mean, ultimately, pushing it back, and coming back, it pushes the timeline a little bit further, just in terms of getting on their implementation schedule and kind of getting it started. But if that's something that's
well, maybe nobody else thinks that's a good idea. I just want to say it out loud,
right.
That just to be from my own. I'm a little bit nervous that it's not written down. That's all. And I think someday there'll be a different council trying to execute this agreement in a decade or whatever. So that's just my thought. Maybe others may not share that concern, but okay.
Lynn, it does address in number 8 on page 148. It talks about the security program, but I do share your concern with EU standards. Is that the benchmark?
As far as I understand it, as far as my cybersecurity knowledge goes.
I would be willing to postpone this, so we know that is the gold standard, not the platinum standard or whatever it is.
Yeah. If that's the council's pleasure. I just think we just need an addendum or something, because you're right, it did address it on page 8, but the document's quite long, and page 8 is 10 lines. So, anyway, just a thought. Vaughn.
Well, I know I brought it up, but it says that they're the lead. And as long as lead means they're 100% responsible, they are, and it just says we assist with regards to that item I brought up. And so, to me, it implies if any of this happens, we'll take care of you, city. And that gives me some comfort in knowing, regardless what it is, I see that we are assisting, and then on other program database monitoring, program database tuning, we're not even part of it. It's all them. They're the lead in everything, and so it makes it where they're really responsible for pretty much a lot of the concerns that we are bringing up. And I guess I just want assurances from our staff going, yes, you know, citizens of Clovis, we trust that they will protect all of you and your data. They are responsible, and we're contracting with them. And if you give me that, I am comfortable moving forward unless there's others who want a delay, and staff says there's no detriment to a delay.
And I think we are comfortable and confident at this point, at least from our perspective, in terms of that's part of why we went in their direction with software as a service and them housing it and them being responsible for maintenance of the data and housing the data and everything like that. That's our confidence in them. But if there is a desire on council's part for further either discussion, or if we need to bring them, have them in either on a call or something like that to kind of assuage some of these concerns, then we can certainly do that as well.
And Scott,
the desire. Yeah.
I mean, this is all going to get legal later and so is this something in which you can also help look into and go, as long as they're responsible with these standards from a legal perspective, it'll protect us. I think that would be valuable to us.
Yeah, the agreement itself does confirm that California law applies. So to the extent that there may be a data breach, the city has certain notification obligations which we need to make. In the agreement, I think one of the pages, I think it was Councilmember Bessinger highlighted that it does require that they provide assistance to the city in meeting the city's data breach notification obligations. So I think to that extent, we comply with California law. They're subject to California law. In this agreement, we make that clear.
All right, any other council discussion? Anyone in the audience wishing to comment on this item? Anyone online?
No.
All right, we'll close the public portion and bring it back to the council for your pleasure or motions or further discussion.
I just have an open question. We can either accept this, ratify it, send it forward, or we can continue it. Is everybody satisfied with the EU versus California law thing, or do we have a further question on that we'd want staff to report back on?
You're comfortable the way it is now?
Well, with the California law standards being applied, I feel more comfortable with Scott, giving us that information. I think pretty much everything that falls under the California standards is probably stricter than anything else that's out there for the most part, so.
Let's see, what, really? All right, well, so I'm kind of with you on that, but so we'll see. Is there a motion of one way or the other?
I'll make the motion to approve the contract as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second to approve this selection of Spry Point services as noted in the staff report. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries 3-2. Thank you, Jeff. If it's possible for Spry Point to send us an addendum, something that could just elaborate on these EU questions, data breach questions, what happens when you still hold on to our data even though you had a data breach 3 years ago. All those are real-life things that have happened in my little world, so I know that they're out there in more places. So it would be helpful, I think, if we could just have some more definition of their security program. even though the contract has been approved and is going on?
Absolutely not a
Okay.
problem. I'll reach out to them right away.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, you bet. Thank you for your work on that. All right. Hold on. The next item is, consider approval. Because I don't do technology, I'm doing paper right now. Hold on one second. For the bid award, CIP 21-07, Fire Station Number 2 rebuild, and authorize the city manager to execute the contract on behalf of the city with Fortune Ratliff General Contractors in the amount of $7,566,341, not $42, $41. Please.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Thaddeus, excuse me, I'm Thad Avery. I'm the Community Investment Program Manager for the City of Clovis. With me here is Nate Stava. He is the project engineer for the Fire Station 2 project. Tonight, I'll be presenting to Council for consideration to approve the award of the construction of the contract for the Fire Station 2 rebuild. Staff is recommending for the City Council to award a contract for CIP 2107 Fire Station 2 rebuild to Fortune Ratliff General Contractors in the amount of $7,566,000.
Approved,
That would be
7,000.
great, yeah.
Meeting adjourned, we're done.
Yeah, don't want to misstep on that one.
We just saved a lot of money, $6 million, just like that.
Yes. And for the City Council to authorize the city manager to execute the contract on behalf of the city. The existing Fire Station 2 site is located on the west side of Minnewawa, just north of Santa Ana, south of Shaw. The project will demolish the existing station and build a new approximately 8,500 square foot station on the existing 37,000 square foot site. The new station will have a similar floor plan to the newly built Fire Station 6. A brief history of how the project came about. The original Fire Station 2 was built in 1978. In recent years, the building began developing signs of structural issues, and staff discovered truss failures. In 2020, a consultant was retained to perform a detailed visual inspection and report on repairs that would be needed. On October 5th of 2020, this information was presented to Council, and Council provided direction to replace the fire station with a new state-of-the-art, high-quality station. Pictures on the side of this slide, on the top is the existing fire station. On the bottom is a rendition of the proposed station. Part of the action plan to replace the fire station was to construct a building at the Fire Training Center site to house the Fire Station 2 crew during construction of the new station. On this slide is a current photo of that building, which will be ready for move-in at the end of this month. Staff at Fire Station 2 is prepared to be out of the fire station by March to enable the start of construction of the new station at that time. The Fire Station 2 project was advertised starting in November of 2022, with a bid opening on January 10th of 23. We received 2 bids. The low bidder is Fortune Ratliff General Contractors at $7,562,341. For this project, the low bid was determined by the base bid. The bid proposal has 2 alternates. Staff is recommending Council to award a contract to Fortune Ratliff General Contractors for $7,566,341. That includes the base bid and bid alternate 1. The construction estimate provided by the architect for this project was $7,632,500. In conclusion, staff is recommending that City Council to award a contract for CIP 2107 Fire Station 2 rebuild to Fortune Ratliff General Contractors in the amount of $7,566,341, and for the City Council to authorize the City Manager to execute a contract on behalf of the City. That concludes our presentation. We're here for questions.
Thank you, Thad. Questions for staff? Drew?
If I heard you correctly, the firefighters are going to be out in March or around March. When do we expect the demo to start?
So As soon as we get the contracts signed and we can get them all scheduled up, we have already contacted the utility companies to have, our services cut off around March 13th, so we're hoping right around that time.
And I realize that, you know, this is early on, but is there an estimated time of completion?
The estimate for the contract is 14 months.
And is there a performance bond as part of this that?
Always, yes. All of our contracts that we do in capital have performance bonds.
Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. Anyone else?
I do.
Oh, sorry.
So I just had two quick questions. On the building that was constructed on the fire training center to temporarily house the crew, is there plans for use for that after it's done housing that crew?
Yes, that was the big part about why we built a building on that site is it's built so that it has two large training rooms with a couple offices and a bathroom, and they're going to be putting up temporary housing units in those rooms so that when they're done they can remove that and they can be used as a training center. And then my other question is, so this station was built in 1978, and finally in 2020, there started to be notices. Is there a process that, had there been issues earlier on, maybe some maintenance or modifications could have prevented a complete rebuild? And if so, is that something that we can do with other stations or other buildings to kind of prevent potentially this situation? Yeah, that's a very good question. We actually have a project in the capital improvement program to assess all the building facilities throughout the city, and this was kind of brought on as we looked at this project, or looked at this site. So hopefully we can assess all those and put them in a forecast of capital improvements so that we don't run into something so significant in the future.
But we have made multiple repairs and to try to keep it together. So we have tried to maintain it, I think, to the point. It's about as old as the Jeff's data system. So we were busy in 1978, 80 buying things that are still around. But we did, I think people have kept an eye on it the whole time to make sure. But it's now, I think, beyond the point of repair is what I think is the circumstance. Anything else? Matt?
Yeah, just a quick question on the build itself. Is it addressing the safety concerns on Santa Ana and the alley, as far as, you know, being able to separate that fire station from the alleyway and on the entrance and stuff? I know that had been talked about a little bit, and I hadn't seen the plan, so I was just curious if it's in here.
I'm not familiar with the safety concern you're talking about, but the setup is pretty much the same as what it currently is. They have a secondary access off the alley, but their main entrance will be coming off of Minnewawa.
Was there anything developed to bring the secondary access? I know that was conversation from the backside instead of off the alleyway. I think that was discussed at one point, and getting reciprocal access to the adjoining property, but that was decided against. Okay. All right. So just real quick, so that's just going to stay with a 6-foot wall then?
That's correct.
John, do you want to comment?
I was just going to add, it's going to be kind of going back to Councilmember Pierce's comment about depreciation. In a perfect world, the city would be depreciating so that we would have enough cash to replace. You take a look at this building right here, it's 1976. At some point, we're going to have to do something with it. When we do the assessment that is talking about, it's going to come back with $20 million of money that we need to put away to replace all these aging facilities, and we're just not going to have the resources to be able to do it, and unfortunately, we end up with a situation where it gets to a particular situation and we're forced to do it. But we'll bring back the numbers so you have an idea.
Anything else?
You know, with regards to the bid process, were there just two, or were there many bidders as well on these, just seeing how
there were only two that came in on time. We actually had one that came in a minute late, but there was only two that came in on time.
Okay. And then can you go back to that photo of the two stations? You know, the new stations, are high, and I guess this is for fire, and we've gone to the newer ones where the, you know, the inside is, this seems very low. Does it, you know, does it cost, is it, because the other ones, when you go in, you know, you see a high ceiling, and it's kind of nice and airy, but...
If you've been into Fire Station 6 yet, it is actually 2 feet taller than Fire Station 6 on the inside of the base.
Oh, it is? Okay. Maybe the photo just
Pictures are
confuses us.
deceiving. It does look
Thank
like
you.
a neighborhood house in some way, with just slightly bigger garage doors. All right. Anything else for staff? Thank you. Thanks. Anyone in the audience wishing to comment on this item? Anyone online?
No.
All right, we'll close the public portion and bring it back to City Council. For a motion?
Motion to approve the bid award for capital improvement project 21-07 and authorize the city manager to execute the contract between the city and Fortune Ratliff General Contractors in the amount of $7,566,341.
Thanks, Drew. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Get going. I guess I didn't ask the fire chief if he wanted to comment. Did you want to say anything? You're never quiet, so I don't even know why I'm inviting you. Why am I even opening that door? Okay. You're welcome. I knew he had to say, I knew he had something to say. I know. How come you two didn't keep him like, no, don't talk, don't say anything? Exactly, that's what you're supposed to do. All right. Next up, receive and file an update from our police department. Chief Fleming.
Well, good evening, Mayor Ashbeck, members of the City Council. Thanks for having me here this evening. Just going to give you a quick overview of the police department, a little history of this last year and statistics in some of the departments, and then kind of looking forward into the future, some of the items that we're looking to, you know, forecast out 20 years. Some of those items being facilities and keeping on that same trend since we're looking at things from the 1980s. We'll look at something from the 1950s.
Oh.
So just a little bit about me. Most of you guys already know me, but I'm born and raised here in the city of Fresno, but been here in Clovis for quite a while now. My law enforcement career's 24 years this year, and been in Clovis for the last 17 and the chief for the last 3.5. So a little bit about my department, or your department, your Clovis Police Department. Instead of giving you a org chart that you can't really see, we decided to kind of break it down into a few slides. So this is a command staff of the police department, made up of myself, 3 captains, a civilian manager, and George Rodriguez, and then the 4 police lieutenants. Starting with Captain Roberts, who's in the crowd here in the back. He's over our operations and mainly patrol captain. And then he supervises the 4 patrol lieutenants. Each lieutenant has separate responsibilities like SWAT, EOD, K-9s, different things like that, but their primary function is responsibility for a patrol shift. Captain Gomez oversees our investigations unit, which is comprised of our general investigations, our special enforcement team, all of our multi-task force type teams like MAGIC, HEAT, ACT. We have somebody on the drug enforcement team now focused on fentanyl. And then his primary, that's his primary, but his main focus right now is hiring, which is mine as well, is hiring and trying to fully staff our police department. Captain Bidham's our Administration and Support Services captain. She oversees all of our volunteers, which are reserves, our citizens on patrol, our chaplains, She's in charge of training, technology, and our liaison with the Clovis Unified School District. George Rodriguez is over youth services and animal services, so he's overseeing the intake and care facility, the pet adoption center, youth services, or graffiti abatement, a little bit of everything. So what we oversee for staffing is 180 full-time employees. That's what we're allocated for. We're currently 7 shy of that, so we have 4 officer vacancies and 3 professional staff vacancies. Budget, just briefly, we come out of the general fund, out of the, I'd say both discretionary and non-discretionary, but just looking at the discretionary, it's always talked about that between police and fire, public safety, we consume about 87% of that, the general fund. So this kind of represents that, of that portion, that's $72 million. Between discretionary and non-discretionary, our total operating budget for this current fiscal year is about $48 million. So over this last year for 2022, I'm going to go through each division very quickly, just give you some highlights on things that they accomplished over this last year. This is just for the administration, the things I oversee and really focus on is kind of setting the department vision, goals for the department. My main focus right now is hiring and recruitment and retention. Internal affairs, I put that up there because any citizen complaints come in, things that we're not doing well, or how can we train better or do better. These all come through my office, get assigned out, and we investigate them to see if there's things that we can do better. So that's solely, every complaint comes through the chief's office. Workers' comp, I put that on there because wellness of our employees, working through the city's HR along with our workers' comp vendor to make sure we can get our people healthy and back to work as soon as possible. We were at, in the last couple of years, upwards of 20% of our staff that was out injured. We average about 10%, that's what we're currently at about right now. And then budget, most importantly, is getting the funds and the equipment and all the things that our staff needs to be able to accomplish the goals of the police department. For patrol last year, just to give you some rough numbers, they responded to 77,000 calls. 46,000 of those came in from the public, and then the officers initiated about 31,000 calls. Support services, there's 3 in there: property and evidence, communication, and records. Just our property and evidence division last year brought in about 8,100 items of evidence. They destroyed over 2 tons of evidence that they were able to process out, and they currently possess within the property room about 27,000 items that they maintain. Communications, our dispatch center brought in answered about 176,000 calls for service, and 38,000 of those 911 calls. And something that I'm, I guess, prideful of or excited about, that our staff, 99% of the calls that we received in our 911 center, and that's all calls, those 176,000 calls were answered in less than 15 seconds. If you called some other agencies before and you might have gotten an answer machine or had to call back because you wonder if you called the wrong number, that has not happened in the city of Clovis, so it's something to be proud about. Records division, they basically, anytime you need something, a report, a traffic collision, a lot of agencies send over requests for backgrounds. That's all the stuff that the records division is processing. Any arrests be made, that paperwork is processed and brought down to the courthouse and filed with them. So last year they processed in and out reports at the counter, about 6,000 reports. Investigations, this number, I couldn't really find a good number to represent what they do, but investigations, as our general detectives, they respond to any calls in the middle of the night, major investigations. Also our SET team, special enforcement team, they're doing human trafficking operations, massage parlor details. They're going out and responding to overdoses for fentanyl related. They're doing a ton of stuff that you can't really capture in a number. So we just put down search warrants, 294. seems low, but the amount of work that goes into a search warrant is tremendous. To be able to make that happen and go out and serve the warrant and then recover the evidence. Youth services, this oversees as well graffiti enforcement. We typically, when you call us, we like to get that graffiti covered up within 24 to 48 hours. We responded to and cleaned up 22,000 sites, or 2,200 sites this last year. Also juvenile PPT hearings, that number's declined over the last several years. We'd like to see that increase. But that's trying to deal with the problem at the lowest level. We get a lot of referrals from the school district, from Clovis Unified School Police. And that's really dealing with the kids at the lowest level, getting them back on the right track. If we need to put them out in our diversion program, maybe out cleaning up some weeds within the city and getting them back on track, but not into the probation system.
Hey, Chief, can you,
Yes, ma'am.
in my world, PPT means PowerPoint. So what does that mean?
Police probation team, is that correct, George?
Thank you.
All right, didn't get
I knew it
stumped
wasn't
yet.
PowerPoint, but I just, in case anyone else didn't know, I thought at least you'd ask.
And that's way before my time, but I remember.
PowerPoint?
No, police.
Oh, say what?
This unit that was created.
Thank you.
It is very unique. It is probably the only one in the Central Valley, and it's really to prevent kids from getting into the system. It's trying to correct them early at an early age and keep them out of the criminal system. And it's been very successful over the years. It just shrunk in size due to our staffing levels. Animal services, this is typically in our top 2 to 3 calls for service. This year is in our top 4, so they had 4,700 calls that we responded to related to animal calls. We had about 25,000 people come in through the Pet Adoption Center over this last year, and we brought into our care facility about 2,500 animals. So all this, all these divisions, this is really what we focus on and how we decide how we're going to provide service to our citizens. And the next slide will be our goals. So as we develop our goals, it's always keeping our mission in mind. And really the last 10 words there, to those we serve, we want to be the best, and that's what we always keep in the back of our head. So to meet our mission, we've had these 3 goals at the top. You guys, I know, have seen these. Diane, maybe, I'm sure you've seen them too. We want to be the safest city in the Central Valley. We want to be responsive. Really, the priority is to be to our highest priority calls in less than 5 minutes, and then make sure our citizens are satisfied with the job we're doing. And then within our department, we create our priorities. So our highest priorities for enforcement, and also within the department, things that we're working on. Staffing and recruitment, again, is our number 1 priority. Employee wellness. Over these last couple of years, we've had a number of domestic violence homicides, and so we've developed a program, hired a part-time person to run that program, and we're working in conjunction with the Marjorie Mason Center to make that happen. Challenges going forward, so things just looking at facilities, getting those on the CIP. We just kind of saw a good example of that with the fire station. Getting things into the system and planning for the future, and things are expensive, so how do we start planning for that now? Hiring and growth is just trying to stay up with the ever-growing city of Clovis, and then retaining our staff and keeping our people healthy. So I'll just go through some of our facilities just to kind of give you an idea. Our building is beautiful, but it's 20 years old already. It's just crazy how time flies. So up on the top right-hand corner, there's a spot on our property that we still have some land there that we're looking to potentially expand at some point. That's just an item that as our property room is getting filled up with items of evidence, at some point we're going to have to expand that. And then the lower right, fire is, I believe, graciously going to be vacating that building in 2024. And we're looking to take over the logistics building at that time. Really, a lot of our larger vehicles in the back lot, we just invested $400,000 in a Bearcat to be sitting out in the sun and getting weathered and beaten up. We much rather have that housed in an enclosed facility that we can try to get those to last 20 to 25 years. We also like to use that as a off-site training site or meeting rooms to expand Things are getting a little tight now, and as different meetings go on throughout the city, a lot of people are using facilities at our department to have meetings. Dispatch center, we just got to do a complete upgrade. So on the left-hand side is the new dispatch center. We've been operating off of our current CAD system for the last 9 years, and during that time, I think in the last 3, we're working on it before that, but it's been a 5-year project to put together a true backup dispatch center. When we had our CAD for the first 5 years, we really didn't have a place to go and backup dispatch. We can send our 911 calls to the sheriff's department, but they would be dispatching our officers via radio, and they'd be handwriting it down like, Adam 12 from back in the 1970s. So we put together off-site a small compact room. You'll see on the right-hand side that it is not the most fun place to work, but it works. So if something was to go wrong at the headquarters, we can completely operate off of that backup dispatch site, and still the people calling in wouldn't see a difference. So we actually used that during COVID for about 4 months. We split our dispatch center into 2 locations. The dispatchers were not happy, but it worked. We also used it recently when the center was down for a month, when we completely updated the new location. They were all operating out of the backup site. So in the future, in the CIP, we have, I think for next year, purchasing some land, starting to develop the plans, and then hopefully in the following 2 years, building a dedicated true backup center. This is a sad picture. That was done on purpose. So this is building, the best estimate I can say is probably in the 1950s. The population of the city of Clovis at that time was somewhere between 5,000 to 10,000 people. We have far exceeded and outgrown the use of this facility. And this is our intake and animal care center at 908 Villa. Originally, this was going to be taken care of in 2013 when we built Miss Winkles as a pet adoption center. Financially, we had to cut back, and this part of that building was cut out. So we're still looking to plan for this. This is going to be expensive, so it's more of a long-term plan, but we're starting to get that on the books to plan for replacing this. So this is the building that we built in 2013, which is 10 years ago. To your right, you'll still see part of that building has not been completed to this day. We had to cut back and cutting the animal care side of it out, or the intake side. We still have square footage, about, I'd say, 2,500 square feet in there that has not been completed to this day, that we could utilize the space. So it's something we're looking to try to get done here in the next few years. This is just a reminder of something I presented in the past, I think in 2021, November of 21. That yellow arrow there just represents the gap of we would need 12 officers just to get to 1 officer per 1,000. And that's our constant battle, is trying to maintain the staffing with the growth of the city. The study that we did back in 21 recommended that we be at 1.2. I was at a COS graduation 2 weeks ago, ran into the chief of Visalia there. I was just in conversation. I asked him, I said, hey, you're roughly the same size as us. He said, there are 142,000 in population. I said, how many officers do you have? They have 164 officers. And I said, how did you guys make that happen? He said, we were in a similar situation as you, but they had a few funding measures that were passed over the last 6-7 years, that one paid for capital improvements, another one paid for officers, and that gained them about 30 officer positions. So to get us to 1.2, it'd be about 39 officers. 30 officers to get us to close to 1.1. I would just love to see that gap close to 1 per 1,000 at this time, if we can get there. So looking forward, we're looking to update the facilities, obviously, as we already covered. Succession planning is a big item for me, with 33% of our department will be of retirement age in the next 5 years. So our command staff that's sitting back here, in 3 years, all of them could be gone but 2. And that's a ton of supervision, ton of leadership, that are potentially going out the door in the next 5 years. So promoting a lot of young people, getting new people in the door, getting new people in supervisor position is really my focus right now, in hiring people, good quality people. And then just lastly, trying to keep up with the ever-expanding city. And so I can commit to you that we are, as the police department, committed, no matter what resources we have, in protecting the city and the Clovis way of life. The bottom there is our pillars, our philosophies, and kind of what we go by, is along with our mission, protection, respect for individuals, service quality, being close to those we serve, department members, taking care of our own, participation, innovation, teamwork, and communication. And we take all those very seriously. So that'll conclude my presentation. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Questions for the Chief? Fong.
Thank you, Chief, for the report. With regards to the hiring, are you finding it where it's difficult to fill, or it'll be easy to fill the number of slots allocated?
It's extremely difficult to do. We've been creative in a number of ways. We've added a pre-academy workout. We've added an entire cadet program. We have contract employees that will pay to go through the police academy. The sooner that we can get people committed, younger, we have people that are working here that are 18 years of age that we plan on keeping as cadets, working through our police department for the next 3 years, and then to get them into the academy and hired on as police officers. It's extremely challenging right now. It's very competitive with other departments. I think city manager just went to a city managers conference, and it is a shared problem throughout the state.
Well, you know, our hope is that your value statement of to those we serve, we want to do best, uphold that in whoever we get. And though it may take longer, like you said many times, at least we will benefit in the long run. And I think that's something I appreciate you upholding with regards to all those who come on board with us. And I thank you for just being out in the community, you know, going into different, you know, niches and sectors to share about Clovis, and to have your staff out at different community events and just having a booth and having a presence out in the community at large. I've heard a lot of comments back, and so thank you for taking that initiative to do that. And with regards to, I guess it'll be Captain Benham, who oversees Clovis Unified and the chaplains. I've been involved with the chaplain group with regards to getting into the community and the churches, and it's an excellent. Deanna has done excellent work there, and our hope is to be able to support what George is doing as well, and to grow that back and to help young people really, you know, straighten their lives at a young age. And so thank you for the report. I think we'll always support you guys.
Matt?
Just real quick, George, on the PT program, is it still at like an 85% success rate of not having recidivism? So, yeah. So, I mean, that's such a huge thing to be able to try and, you know, get our youth programs and that kind of thing back in place. And I know that PPT has been super successful going back to, you know, Doug Taylor's days of getting that program going. I just wanted to kind of make a comment on one of the things that I would like to see us be able to do in the future is bringing on a full-time grant writer for the city to specifically help with the process of trying to, you know, get the funds out there for police officers and for other parts of the city as well. You know, having sat on oral boards and listening to different things that are brought from other cities, you know, you kind of realize just how important it is to have that person who is an expert at grant writing to bring funds in. And, you know, our people do great, but when was the last year that the PD got grant funds from a federal grant? Do you remember?
Yeah, you know, I wrote that down too, because we're looking the other day at there's a meeting coming up to discuss some of these things, but I think it was 2007, 2007, that the last time we actually got a federal grant for police officers. Everything else that we currently get, there's some federal grants, but very small JAG grants, that's $15,000 and $70,000 here we pay for cadets with it. But most of our grants are, through the state for OTS, for DUI enforcement, through the, tobacco grants to do tobacco enforcement. But really, there's nothing out there or nothing that we ever have been successful in obtaining for federal grants for actual police officer positions.
Yeah, the last one I remember, I think Councilmember Bessinger might have been part of as well. Back in 2006 or 7, where I think we got 7 or 8 officers on a federal grant through the COPS program, but I don't recall any. I know I didn't get any.
No.
And so we applied every time, but you know, it's like, where are we missing the boat on that? I mean, is there something internally? Does a grant writer full-time bring us that capability to do so? That's just my thoughts on that for going forward. And then there was one question I had for you, and in terms of being chief, what is the one thing, if you could do now, what would it be, outside of hiring people, obviously, that you're not able to do?
Yeah, I know these guys back here could name a number of things. There's so many things that we could do. Really, the weekend swing shift would be critical right now. If we could do that, that would open up the doors for so many training opportunities, open up the doors for potential some wellness issues with the ability to work out, maybe with some shifts. There is our traffic unit has 2 traffic officers. When I came here in 2006. We had 4 traffic officers and a traffic supervisor, so a total of 5 in the unit. We have 2 today, and the city has expanded tremendously in that time, in the last 17 years. We should really have a motor unit, a traffic unit of probably 9 to 10 officers out enforcing, and it's just not happening right now. If you drive around the city compared to 20 years ago, you know, I have people blowing by me all the time in my personal car, and I'm like, geez, I wish I was in a work car right now. And on the freeway, the same. I know back when the freeway first got installed here, Jim Zolan had some of our officers out working enforcement on the freeways. Didn't make CHP very happy, but we believe that, you know, we're going to keep the public safe, slow people down, and when people entered the city of Clovis, they knew that I better slow down or I'm going to get a ticket. And I think that has been lost over the years. And that's strictly due to not having a traffic unit out there enforcing the traffic laws every day.
Ed, I lied. I had one other question for you. Over the last several years, how much of a decrease have you seen in the ability to be proactive as opposed to having to be reactive?
A ton. We've tried to mitigate that by not allowing our patrol staff to shrink in size. Kind of what I covered in the presentation to council a couple years ago or a year and a half ago was we're piecemealing patrol together by kind of making all of our units smaller, like the traffic unit's a good example, going from 5 to 2. Detectives being almost the same size as it was 30 years ago. Our set team being what we used to have a narcotics team and a gang team, now they're one team, because we're pulling those bodies to put them back into patrol so we can still be proactive on the patrol side, but that takes away from all the proactivity that we do on those specialized units, which are so important.
I have one last question real quick for John. Earlier we had a presentation on CIP money being used for rebuilding the fire station. With Ms. Winkles having the vacated space and stuff, is that something that could be on the list for CIP money to get that built out so that we can move people out of the 1950 building?
It definitely could be. It's a matter of priorities that the chief is going to have to set. And where does it fit in your demand?
Yeah.
You know, is the alt dispatch more important? Is Ms. Winkles more important? And then at the end of the day, we have a certain amount of money left over that where we can do a certain amount of projects. And that's where you draw the line. So the answer is maybe.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
I was just going to make one comment. we do advocate with our federal elected officials when we have an opportunity to say that you only fund cities where crime is really terrible. You don't fund cities that are doing well, and how do you keep us doing well? So we can continue to advocate for that. I don't think it's obviously demonstrated big return, but I think we're all keenly aware of that's always the way you don't have enough crime. Well, right, isn't that the point? So it's a little bit of a backwards view, so I think that's, I wanted to say that. And I had another point, but I forgot it. Drew.
And, thank you, and to that point, maybe we can advocate for traffic safety grants so that we can use those monies specifically to bolster our traffic unit. I agree with the chief, and I think we've all seen it. You have people blowing by you 20-plus miles an hour. You look at a great majority of intersections have little wheelies from people acting like fools in their cars. When I was a young police officer, I looked at the vehicle code as a means to stop somebody who was out committing crimes. And as I became more mature, I realized that slowing folks down helps the safety of the community. And frankly, the only real way to slow them down is to write them a ticket. You can warn people all day long and they go la, 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 and they go down the road. I kind of to expound on Matt's point, even when we hit the skids financially in 2007, we kept our youth services on life support to include our community service work program. And I had a young man come up to me 2017. George will remember this guy's name was Gilbert. And Gilbert was a tough character. He made it very clear that his family was a prison family and he was going to go to prison because that's where he wanted to be. He was extremely difficult to deal with. And I would see him on patrol and I would stop the car and I would have a conversation with him about what's your plan, where you going, you don't want to do this. And I know that other officers were having the same conversation. And I bumped into him at the, what's the coffee shop downtown?
Rodeo Cafe.
Yeah. And he came up to me and says, do you remember me? Which is always a trick question generally for a law enforcement officer. Mr. Bester, do you remember me? And he says, I'm Gilbert. Yes. And he told me he's a minister, and he is the president of a local city's Rotary Club.
Oh.
And I mean, 5 minutes later, I called George, and I said, you're not going to believe who I just saw. Because George and I had a lot of contact with him, and he became a project amongst many other kids. And so when we look at the investment we make in some of these programs where you may go, well, you know, we could probably, if we shut that down, we can put three more cops on the street. You know, it's an investment, and we're going to need to do that. I think we're going to need to invest in our traffic unit too, by maybe having that conversation next week. Thank you.
It's funny, people think we have 15 motorcycle officers. Like, people say to me, they're everywhere. Really, that's impossible. There's one. So, anyway, so whatever the image is, people think there's many out there. Right. They'll be disappointed if there's only two. Dan?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly echo what Drew was saying. That story is a perfect example of what Vong was alluding to in our meetings with the chaplains and their connection to the churches and the beats. And I think that the youth services and prevention programs, coupled with being able to connect people with those resources that are already available in our community, is absolutely huge. And I think it's probably part of why we are doing as well as we are with as little as we have. And also, I agree 100% with Matt as far as a grant writer, because even if those grants aren't tailored to the specific interest we have at the moment, if we find those that can do anything, then we can, you know, kind of move things around and free up other dollars. And so I think having someone who has an expertise in that and can know, I mean, kind of like Drew said, looking for traffic grants or something, there's going to be a whole host of things that we wouldn't be able to come up with on our own that somebody who is involved in that industry, and it's an industry, would actually be able to benefit us a lot. So I agree with that. And two other things quickly. Again, Vong alluded to it as well, and I think that it is so important to make sure that we maintain the quality of the people that we have. I know recruitment is difficult. I know retention is difficult. But even if we funded 1,000 positions, if we didn't have the standards that we have in this city, that wouldn't solve any problems at all. And so I appreciate that you're committed to maintaining the quality of the people that we bring on, and anything that we can do to help in that so that we don't lose the quality, but we can still increase the quantity. Those are valuable conversations that I know we'll continue to have. And then the last thing, and this may be more of a question for John, or I'm not sure, but on something like a Miss Winkles specifically, if there are capital improvements or things like that, is there an avenue to get private funds for that? I mean, people love animals, and there are some people with some deep pockets that really love animals. So is that an option for something specific like Miss Winkles?
There is, and you can do fundraising, that type of stuff, and we have, what's the name of the organization you guys have that manages the private sector funding for gathering funding?
For the Police Foundation, or they actually have a Miss Winkles?
Yeah, Miss Winkles Police Foundation.
Friends of, I'm sorry.
Friends of.
Okay.
You got me on that one.
Sorry.
There'll be a test later.
Yeah, because I think that would be a great thing to tap into for that specifically and kind of jumpstart it even.
Well, the origin of Miss Winkles was Dave McDonald, a very large private gift. So it has its heart in private philanthropy. I know the annual fundraiser probably took a break during COVID, but it is a really important part of the equation, along with other major donors. But Mr. McDonald was the start of the Miss Winkles idea. Bless his heart. Yeah.
Real quickly, and maybe we can take the opportunity to work with our at-risk youth and our friends at Clovis Community College. That would be getting, maybe coming up with some type of funnel to Clovis Community College and going to our local Rotary clubs and Kiwanis, maybe to pay for books and things like that. So that would, and we can grow our own. It could be, members of our Explorer Post who maybe come from a situation where they don't have the financial wherewithal. Because there were members of the command staff like Dan Sullivan that I hired as a community service work program supervisor. So we can grow our own and be very successful.
So you mean having at-risk, say, young adults do like peer counseling, peer support in the youth services? Or tell me more what you're thinking about, or connecting with Clovis Community and helping them funnel from what George does to enroll, or what do you say more?
Kind of what I'm thinking is if we have a young man or a young woman who's having some behavioral challenges, whether it's, through Clovis Unified, but if we can get them on an education path where they see some hope, and we can get them to a counselor over there, or we come up with some type of interface where we can send somebody over to see somebody, or maybe even have an orientation night for the city and invite lots of folks so that they can say, I could really do this. I know we tried reaching out to the military bases and getting folks in, and it was getting more and more difficult all the time. And to me, it's a crime prevention tool in the future. It's a developing leaders, young leaders, and potentially having a recruitment pool of police officers, firefighters, city employees, or just great folks who are going to go into the healthcare field or any number of things.
That's a really good idea. To the youth services, in addition to Clovis Community, I was also thinking about it's in the interest of Clovis Unified to share in the kind of restoration of these kids so they can stay in high school, so they can eventually get to Clovis Community College. So maybe the next time we have a subcommittee meeting, we could talk a little about that, because those recidivism numbers are pretty impressive. And those kids that are not circling through juvenile hall are actually going to high school. And that, I mean, it's a win for the kid, but it's certainly good for the district, and it's certainly good for the college at some point, and maybe there is some way to sort of lift up all of that with all these ideas, because I do think investing is a lot less expensive to hire a community service intern or community service something to help these kids as opposed to a sworn officer. We need them both, but I mean, there might be some opportunities there to collaborate with the college, the district, and the city in helping build that force.
We actually have a great relationship with the district, and probably I'd say 90% of our referrals right now are coming from the school district.
Yeah.
George Rodriguez just hosted several of their newer officers at our department 2 weeks ago, just to go through the program, talk about it, and explain what the benefits are for them when they make the referrals, what actually happens on our side.
Yeah.
So that relationship's going really well. We'll have to expand and explore how we can do that at the next level.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. I had two questions specifically. Do we still have a mental health clinician from DBH?
Absolutely, yes.
And where does that person fit in the umbrella, the structure?
Is that who's that under?
Quick, somebody help him. Phone a friend. You got a friend in the back row.
Katie, yeah.
Say
Captain
where?
Benham.
Captain, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So that's housed, I was thinking, because it's housed in George's side of the police department. They're under Captain Benham for the mental health side of it. We have two, they have radios, they have a desk at our police department. That is probably one of the greatest things that the county's mental health has done. It's helped our officers tremendously, great working relationship, and they're available all the time to come out and help us.
Your mental health dispatch calls, are they 80-20, 80% adults, 20% kids? Do you have a sense of that, just roughly?
I can tell you it's on the increase tremendously. Our mental health calls are on the rise, but I honestly don't have a breakdown between juvenile and adult, but now you're going to make me figure that out. So.
Be curious to know, because there's a lot of work happening around children's mental health, and how do you intervene sooner with kids in maybe different ways, but certainly through this clinicians. That would be curious to know if you could get that breakdown, even just roughly what that number is. And then the prescription drug drop-off box is still out front?
It's still out front.
People drop things off?
Yeah, I believe that.
I do.
Remember the fire department's to senior center, right? Yeah, they're at senior center. They're kind of throughout the city.
And that's not presented a problem for you anyway?
No, I think initially there was a lot of companies that were coming in and disposing of them to save money, but honestly it hasn't presented that big of a problem. So then even if we can get them from them and they're expired or whatever, just get them off the street.
It's a great service. Echoing the comments, thank you, Chief, and all of you back there. Do an awesome job, and people live here because they're safe because of you and the fire department, so we are grateful for what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else for the Chief?
Mayor, yeah. Chief, you know that 30 is sort of that number you said to get to 1-to-1, and so with 30, you would be able to fill all the different units, or is that still not even to where we can fill the units to where there's some satisfaction and some effectiveness in the work that we're doing?
We could definitely get back to doing business as we were 15, 20 years ago. I think we could expand our traffic unit, get our detectives up where they should be, add that swing shift on the weekends so we have better coverage. And it would allow, again, for more training of our staff. It just gives us more flexibility with having the shifts spread out. Right now on the weekends we have to work 12 and a half, so we only have 2 shifts and there's a very small overlap. So it presents challenges. So if we can add a shift in between to give some overlap there, it would give us a lot more opportunities to do some more things.
And there was, I took it as a pretty urgent, your plea when you came before us about a year and a half ago. And I don't want us to drop that. And so is it still that urgent in which services, if we don't get you to that 30, where services in certain areas will have to be looked at very closely, where our residents will start to not receive certain services?
Not
Is it
only,
still that urgent?
not only you have to look at potentially cutting services or calls that we respond to, it's the type of people that are coming into our city and the type of crimes that are being committed. Seeing, you know, more gang members, more people with possessing guns, that only leads to violence, so it leads to homicides. So we're seeing those things now and start trying to prevent it and making those arrests. But adding those additional officers, getting that back in check, getting those people that aren't here to be good citizens out of our city, we want to do that before it gets to a point where we can't get that back. And we're having certain pockets of our city that, you know, are just not going to be good pockets because they've been overrun. And adding 30 officers really isn't going to make a difference to fixing that. And you can drive through some areas in different towns, and you probably know what I'm talking about. So, yes, it's still that urgent, especially on the traffic side, on the patrol side, and definitely on the detective side. We actually moved somebody out. We're using some of the opioid money that we got recently to offset an officer's salary so they can focus on the task force with the DEA, focus on fentanyl, because we're seeing so many overdoses in our community, a lot of young juveniles overdosing on fentanyl. So trying to impact that to have less kids that are potentially dying in the future. So just trying to be creative with the resources that we have right now.
And with that, I mean, I would just say to our city manager, you know, we made a decision at the last council, and we're only about a year away from the next election. And so how do we keep that at the forefront? What are the different avenues we can take and how we can get that rolling? And Mayor, I would ask that be on the agenda sometime soon, so that way we can start discussing that and make it happen now, because there's an initiative that just got on the ballot where they're gonna affect how we do different initiatives with different passages. So because of that, I think it's better to do it sooner rather than later. And if we get into 2024, at least that's when that initiative is gonna get on the ballot as well. And so we kind of beat that and be able to see what our citizens think.
In response to your question, Councilmember Wanatuna, it would be a direction from a consensus of the council for me to put something on the agenda to begin discussions of, I believe you're talking about something for November of 2024. So I could get that direction tonight if you chose to do it.
Talking about it, yes. We don't have to do anything. Dan's going, wait, do I say yes, do I say no? Talking about it.
Yeah, I'll have something for your approval. I'm kidding.
Just talking about it. Well, and I think raising the subject is important, and whether it's probably going to be generated by citizens who will lead the work. I think that's probably right, and potentially how that might turn out. So I think if we can start having the conversation in the public space, I think that will. People might be thinking about, I could step up and do that, whether it's a chamber or a private citizen or whatever. I think would be good to get that out there. I was going to ask you a question. I should know the answer to this after all these years, but I don't remember. Code enforcement is housed where? You?
Yeah, within the police department. There's kind of a joint effort. Andy, you want to cover that? I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, so we have a code enforcement team made up of members from all departments. We have staff that focus on Muni code enforcement in PD, and they do a great job, and they're backed up by the rest of the city as we deal with different issues.
And we have enough capacity to do that well and often enough and follow up and all of that?
Like with anything, we could use more. You know, the chief and I have talked about the need to bolster that at times. We're doing well, but not as great as we could.
Well, maybe as we venture into thinking about what the future might look like, I think I've said this 10 times in 20 years. Obviously, it's not a good idea, but I think some cities have really strong rental housing inspection programs that generate a little bit of money to cover the cost of some of that. So it may be that those opportunities, because as the housing stock starts to decline, that's the beginning of the end of a neighborhood, right? And so we have neighborhoods where there's, you know, housing stock is very marginal. So that just, there might be other strategies cities have tried to do that we might be able to pursue.
I'd
All
love
right.
to have, for the enforcement side, I'd love to have a group of 5 CSOs that were just strictly out,
Yep.
doing municipal enforcement, code enforcement within the city, working with this team to focus on certain areas. But
Yep.
you drive around right now, and there's RVs, there's boats, there's overgrown yards, there's cars parked in front of houses for months on end, and things that, you know, frankly, a lot of the CSOs I talk to are, it's upsetting driving by these things, going to calls, and something they can't address because they're going to call that the citizens are calling in, and that's our priorities to get, when you call, is to get there, but we also like to be proactive and enforce those things when we see them, but we're just not able to do that at this point.
I just think that, I just remember a very long time ago, 2002 or 3, we were doing some neighborhood meetings in the Southwest, and in those days, yes, this is how old I am, we gave people disposable cameras, because we didn't have cell phones, and we used to go out and take 10 pictures of your neighborhood of things you like and things you don't, and they brought them back, and it was jarring to see what they saw, because we don't, you know, we all live in our own neighborhood, and the thing that I'll never forget is the things they wanted as solutions were pretty simple. Like, I just wish the house could use all the same color tarps as they hang them over their cars. That was legitimately what they said. So I think sometimes we think it's this really grandiose, but people, they have really simple requests to live in tidy, not elaborate. But anyway, so I do think there's such value in that. So that's, you could add that to your list of things you'd like to have as a chief, because I do think it matters a lot to neighbors that we are proactive and not, you know, well, I'll never forget that family who told me that was their request, is people could have the same color tarps in their front yard. So I think we can't forget that. Matt?
Yeah, just one other question on the volunteer program. With COVID and everything, has that come back at all in any shape, or is it still pretty hurting?
Yeah, it's hurting. We lost a ton of our citizens on patrol. We still have a core group of probably, I'd say 10 to 12 that come out routinely. But it would be nice to get it back up to 20, 25 is what we had before. And most of them will come out on a 4-hour shift once a week. But when you have 25 people doing that, it definitely makes an impact. Just driving around, citizen calls in and says, hey, I'm going to be on vacation. Can you just check on my house? That's a huge benefit to have. They issued some parking citations for handicap and some other things. So we were talking about the other day, I think you were the chief the last time when we did the kind of a recruitment thing for our volunteer positions. So some we're looking to do again.
All right, thank you. We'll open the public comment. Anybody in the audience wanting to comment on this discussion of the receive and file from our police department? Dr. Armstrong, you got an idea sitting out there, so let's hear what it is. I could tell you were like, I gotta stand up, I wanna talk. Now's your chance. And would you just state your name and address, since or not your address, but your name just for the record, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kim Armstrong.
Thank you. Yeah, you bet.
You know, I was excited about this conversation. I had the pleasure of meeting Chief before I actually moved here. So I was aware of his commitment to this community and to safety and to diversifying his team, but also to serving the community. We just had a discussion today with the district about grant writer, hiring a grant writer. So I would like to offer that to you as we move forward, as we collaborate, that we are looking at the same kind of things, making sure we have people in place who do this for a living so that we can continue doing what we do the rest of the day. Also, of course, Chief and I have talked about the recruitment aspects of what we can do to increase that pipeline. So that's two things. The third thing, however, that I'm most excited about is the potential for a partnership between all of us and our school districts and our communities to not only increase the pipeline at the college level, but at an earlier level where we're also impacting the importance of a safe environment as our youth are being part of that process. So I really would like to work with you on establishing some grants, but also some parameters of how that will look as we move forward to making a difference in our community.
Sold. Thank you very much, Dr. Armstrong. Des?
Yes, Des House. I'm echoing everybody's sentiments on public safety and how important that is. In regards to the question on how many were juveniles versus adults on the mental health checks, I would really look into those numbers because school districts get funding for children that are on IEPs through the age of 21 sometimes, and it can be split between public entities. So maybe there's a way to offset some of those fundings on those calls. I just sit on a legislative committee for mental health on that part, so I would throw that out there.
Thanks, Des. Good idea. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on the public safety or the police department update, excuse me? Anyone online?
No.
All right, thank you so much. We'll bring it back to the council, and that is a receive and file, and consider it received and filed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent work, as always. Thank you to the command staff sitting back there. And I'll just say, when you said of your command staff, all but 2 could be retired in 3 years, I could tell the difference. The 3 that were going to retire were all smiling. The 2 that looked really sad were like, oh, it's not me. I'm just kidding. Thank you all for what you do. All right, next up under council items, we're going to update on the Historic Preservation Committee and seek some direction moving forward. And John, I'll just give one intro statement for Matt and Diane. This was an item that we've talked about a bit over the last year. Started kind of over a concern or an issue on a particular building in our community and led to a discussion about how do we make sure we hold on to what's historical in our community, we don't turn into a whole bunch of malls and Starbucks and whatnot. So that's how it started, and then the council shifted. So I think tonight we can kind of update Diane and Matt, and then give direction on how to proceed. We did agree at the end of last year to move forward with the commission. I forgot how many people we said, but I saw it in here, 10, 2 per. So I think just letting Matt and Diane in particular weigh in, Drew, Vaughn, if there's new ideas, and then affirming how to move forward if we'd like to advance this idea. So I think, John, that's my cue up for you. That might be enough.
And that's pretty much my presentation. Is there any questions?
Thank you so much. Very good.
I'll go over it real quickly.
Yeah, please do.
In May of last year, we received a letter from Sari Miller representing the Clovis Big Tri Creek Historical Society requesting that the City Council create some kind of historic preservation commission or committee. It came up primarily related to 3 years prior to that, the committee being formed to take a look at the preservation of the Carnegie Library building in Old Town Clovis. The Carnegie Library is owned by the Clovis Chamber of Commerce, and the City of Clovis has limited to no control over how that building is used. At that meeting, it was the consensus of City Council to pursue the formation of some type of committee. We came back on September 12th and basically presented a couple different options for Council to consider. One, option A, was going to be to establish some type of temporary committee, or B, to consider an ordinance that would create a historic preservation board. At the end of the night, the direction was to option A, basically to have the City Council appoint 10 members, 2 each. The committee members would be required to live within the city limits. It would be an ad hoc committee that would meet until the objectives were achieved or met, and the committee would be subject to the Brown Act. The charge of the committee would be to identify criteria that could be used to assess historic resources. And in assessing historic resources in the City of Clovis, and identify properties that could potentially be historic resource. In addition to that, to provide recommendations to the City Council on the preservation of those identified resources. The committee would then come back and report out on those 3 items in number 5 above. Like the mayor indicated, in October, the decision was made to table the discussion until after the November election. So staff is now returning to City Council to basically do 2 things. One is going to be to, with the new City Council, confirm the actions that were noted above from the September 12th meeting. And then 2, if confirmed, seek names from each of the council members to make up the body of the committee. Not tonight, of course, but that would be it. So with that, I know we have Mrs. Miller and Mr. Wright in the audience this evening, and I'd like to open it up to the public or address any City Council questions.
Thanks, John. Any questions for staff before we invite the public up? All right, so we'll invite the public to comment on this item. I see you two are, what are you doing, like rock, scissors, paper, to see who's going to go first? Sari. Welcome back.
Just press the button. There you go. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
Well, I'm pleased that this process came as far as it did. And my comment is that I would really hope that this were not a controversial committee. And I felt that in the way that planning lined up with ordinances and tried to confine it to something. And I think that possibly there were some comments from my friends at the BIA who are concerned that, you know, there'll be no land left because we're going to, you know, preserve everything that's falling down in the city of Clovis. So I think that I would, as a person who has a Sanger address, although I have a Clovis business address in the center of the future home place master plan community, that you get a wide array of people who really can talk about the history of Clovis, because unless a person has deep roots here or grew up in the city limits of the old city, of Old Town, you're not going to really get a flavor for this. And so I would just urge you to appoint people who really have the heart for this, and I would be hopeful that it would grow, because there are a lot of funds available out there. You know, we keep talking about grant writing. A lot of money is available if you can tap into that, and, you know, taking that back to the library. I live pretty far from the Carnegie Library, but we opened a Pandora's box of people who care deeply about that building. And every time we go back to those discussions, it's always, well, who's going to pay for this? And in the scheme of things, it's not that much money, you know, but you know, it's not the highest priority. So I think that if we can get a committee together and explore some of the avenues that other towns have used to save their old towns and enhance the use of their old towns. We do a very good job in Old Town anyway, but just to make those things permanent and well-funded, that this commission or committee could make that happen. So thank you.
Yep, thanks for coming back, Sarah. Mm-hmm. You're a good advocate for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Does Tom want to talk?
She said it all? Oh, come on.
Had no intention of speaking tonight, but I think the committee the people who have expressed an interest in the committee are ready to get going, and we had a nice little break. We just look forward to get moving and do it in a positive way that helps everybody and makes the community better. So.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Mayor, can I make one comment?
You bet.
Is going to be that this is taking it off Renee's plate, because when we came back with the ordinance, it was at my direction. It wasn't planning's idea to come back with it. I took it a little bit further than it probably should have gone in the initial stages. I think it was Andy and Renee that presented that night, and I let them take the blame. But I just want to say that it was my direction that they developed that ordinance.
Well, thank you, and not required, and no blame. And everything's planning's fault anyway, so I don't know what difference it makes. She's kind of used to it. Just kidding. Thank you, John. I think I think we were just trying to find our way. So I think the pendulum swung there versus, hey, 10 people that want to have coffee. It's not that. It's somewhere in the middle of those two things. So thank you for that. Anyone else in the public wanting to comment on this item? Anyone online? No. All right, we'll bring it back to the council for some direction or questions or comments. Go ahead, Drew.
I had two names, they were given me on a piece of paper. I put them in a pair of pants, they went through the washing machine. I have to make another phone call. I will get on my two. I don't know that we need to have two. That was the general direction we had. I would think that at least 5, but, you know, I don't want to see us get hamstrung with only have one, and that holds everything up. So I'll work on that.
Fair enough. Other comments, Diane?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think it kind of dovetails with our conversation from the last meeting that was joint with Planning Commission as we're talking about the general plan moving forward. And we had a conversation about the history of our community and how important that is to us and the value that it is. And so I see a lot of importance in this. And I just want to ask, I know you sit on the Clovis Historical Society, so what is the kind of, or the anticipated connection and collaboration of this particular committee with what's already in place? How would that work?
So I can't speak for them, but I'll just speak for them. I think they are, right now, they're just two separate groups. The Historical Society isn't set up to be the historical preservation sort of committee. Not that you might not have a member or two from that group. And maybe someday this would be a subcommittee of the Historical Commission, or Historical Society. I'm not sure. But the Historical Society really is about running the museum and preserving the history through that kind of venue, I think, primarily. I think someday they could do this, but I don't think today. So I think if we got it started and sort of saw what developed, over time it could live there, but not out the gate.
But it would be done in such a way that there wouldn't be like a redundancy.
No.
That we would design it so that they really worked together as needed and no real
That certainly would be my vision. Yeah, no. I think the Historical Society has typically been here. They're very supportive of the idea. It aligns with, you know, the kind of the mission and the spirit of that group. But yeah, there's no conflict or tension at all. Good question, but no, none at all. Not speaking on behalf of them, but just the opinion of me.
Yeah.
No conflict at all.
Perfect.
Yeah. Anything else?
Oh, sorry, I had one other thing that also kind of came to mind as I was hearing people talk, and there's another, there's a group, I think it's mostly just a Facebook group right now, but it's called the Clovis Community Beautification Program, and I know they've met with some city staff in that, but I think there's a lot of interest in this type of thing. What I've seen from this particular group, I have a friend that is kind of spearheading it, but just the idea that there are a lot of areas in our town that need some additional attention and that they're focusing on some alleyways and that type of thing, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for that investment in our community and getting people on board and kind of getting skin in the game and recognizing where these areas are that are needed. And so I think this is a great first step, and I think there's probably a lot of other great steps to come after it too.
Yeah, agreed. Good comment. Long.
Just to help, my understanding, Mayor, is that this committee is coming back with the recommendation if we should even have a historical commission, correct? So all that you're talking about is something which they will bring back and formulate sort of the, if not the structure of it, all that. So in other words, it's not the historical commission.
Correct.
So we're finding people to help do that job, and they may later on be on, if the recommendation is to have an actual historical commission, then they can also be on it, depending on what the criteria.
I think that is correct. That is correct. I think as we landed last time,
Can I interject?
Yeah.
So you, from the September meeting, you actually took a little further action on that. And the criteria that the committee would be charged with was, first of all, identifying the criteria, and then going out and assessing historic resources that could possibly be identified, and then to provide recommendations to the City Council on the preservations of those identified resources. So it'd be an ad hoc committee that would be created for a term, and the final report from this ad hoc committee would be for them to report back to City Council on the criteria and potentially locations of what they believe to be, and then how those locations could be preserved.
And I think it also includes sort of how they might have an idea of what the structure should be going forward. Is it a subcommittee of the Historical Society? Is it a subcommittee of the Tourism Committee? I don't know. Is it a separate commission that requires all the work that you've already done? So I think it would organically come from a group of people whose heart is in this space. So I think that's...
I'm sorry, but we also added that with the general plan update, the ordinance that we had identified earlier could possibly something that would be rolled into that.
Yeah, it could be part of the general plan update. I mean, so I think there's lots of avenues, but I think the interest is let's just start and see what conversation comes of it, and the answer always comes out of citizens talking about what it should look like. So I think that's sort of what our opportunity is today.
And so the action I'd be looking for this evening with the direction would be to, first affirm the direction we received on September 12th. And if you wanted to make any changes to it, like Councilmember Bessinger said, at least one from each council member, possibly two, I'd be looking for that in a motion.
All right, anything else, Vaughn?
I just wanted a definite date so that way it gets going.
That's, yeah, no,
And
definitely,
so, yeah, instead of just, I would think by mid-March, that they can go. Hey, we waited
I was
long
gonna
enough.
say next Monday, but
Okay,
maybe
yeah,
that's too
even
much.
better.
Maybe that's too much. Matt, any comments? All right, I've lost track of where, did I open the public comment? I must have, because you talked, and then you talked, so I'm gonna close it all down again. All right, so, is there a, motion or direction? Drew, do you want to specifically, I think there's two things. I would raise one other. If you want to adjust the 2 to 5 per council member kind of number or whatever. And then I don't know if we want to revisit, I think I didn't like that you had to live in Clovis, because Sarah, you're a good example of, you don't live in the city, you either live or work in the city, but the previous council, so I would just raise that again, because some of our, the Linenbacks come to mind, they don't live in the city, so I would raise the live, maybe live or work, potentially, just for your consideration as you think about the motion.
I would agree with that, because I know that it had been discussed earlier, about either live, work, own property.
Oh, that's right,
And
that's right.
so I think that gives, one way or another, it gives someone skin in the game instead of just being a fly in the ointment.
Agreed. Okay.
Can I ask a question on that? So if they have a Clovis address, but it's not within the city limits, like they didn't get to vote for us, how does that factor in? Because I have someone in mind that would apply to, has history in the city, but technically
they don't.
It's a Clovis address.
But it's not the city of Clovis.
But it's not within the city of Clovis, right?
Unless, I mean,
how would that work?
Quill Lake or something like that, or, yeah.
Are you thinking if they can articulate historical ties, that would be an exception?
I guess that would be my question, is I know there are a lot of people who have historic connections to what the types of things we're talking about, but their current address wouldn't fit, because they're retired, so it's not working, it's not living. They do own property, again, with a Clovis address, but not in the city limits, but how do we think about that?
I guess we could make the motion that they live, work, own property, or have a significant articulable historical connection to the community that would make them a good fit.
Okay.
We just want people that care about Clovis, like, that's really it.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, I mean, at the end of the day, it's our job to find two people that have a heart. I've already found two. One, two. Yeah. Tom, look up. 1, 2. Want to be on it? Good. Motion, okay. I already picked my two. There you have it. But I think, is that your, and then do you want to make the range like 2 to 5 or something, or what do you want to do with the number?
Yes, each council member will put at least one person forward to a maximum of 2. And the criteria is they live, work, own property in the city of Clovis, or have a significant historical connection to the community.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? You guys okay with that? It's the public comment, yeah? Yeah? Okay, motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, so
what I would do is, once I get the names from the council members, I'll bring that list back, and it's usually an appointment by the mayor with a consensus of the council.
okay. And so if we could bring the names back by,
As soon as I get them.
but let's just say, I don't have my glasses on. Is our next council meeting the 21st?
21st and March 6th.
So let's shoot for the 21st, the two names, and then we'll try to get this group together as soon as we can, realistically, after that. And then I think the first gathering will be sort of like, how do you want to operate, and what really matters, and just sort of work that out as we go. And then I think this isn't a lifetime commitment. This isn't a 10-year committee. You're welcome. And then we'll just see sort of how the conversation goes. Yeah?
Perfect.
Okay. So I have my first name, Tom Wright. Do you want to do it too?
He was already selected.
Do you want to do it too? Sarah Miller, I've got two. I win.
Well,
Sorry. I'd forget to do it if I didn't do that. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you both for being here and saying yes. Did you say yes? I think you did. All right. City manager comments. John.
I have none.
Council comments. Matt.
So just this last week, I went to the Pink Hills fundraiser which helps people with cancer. So that was a good event on Saturday. Joni, my wife, is a big supporter of that group, and Katie's sister, Lisa Benham, is the chairperson for that organization, and they've done a lot of good things over the past several years. So that was a good thing to go to. I went to I signed up to be part of the Rodeo Association, so I actually went out and did yard work on Saturday with them. That hurts now. And then just on Officer Carrasco's funeral, which is coming up this Thursday, I won't be at the service because I was asked to participate with Channel 47 to help kind of give some perspective to the funeral itself. So I told them I would do that. So I actually conferred with Chief Fleming on that one to make sure that sounded like the right thing to do, and it just helped bring a perspective to what's actually occurring that day. So that's all I got.
Thank you for doing that, Matt. Diane?
I don't have too much, but I just wanted to kind of in the whole historical conversation that we've been having lately, I had come across, and I'm sure you guys have all long since had it, but I came across a book a few months ago that just happened to be in the store, and it was this Images of America, Clovis, from the Clovis Centennial Book Committee, and I am just really excited about it, and it made me think again, too, just about the importance of having something like this, because obviously I haven't been a resident of Clovis as long as some people, and then also being new to the council and learning so much about why we are who we are, and having a way to make sure that we continue to pass that down to the people who follow me as new residents and continue to buy into the Clovis way of life. And so I just am excited to know and continually hear that that is such an important part of all the different things that we do here, whether it's the general plan, talking about this committee and potentially a commission and whatever that might be. But I just wanted to the group that was responsible for this, thank you for that work, and I look forward to ways to work off of this and synthesize some of it in different ways to make sure that, you know, whether someone buys a new house in Clovis or is a new renter in their first apartment here, that somehow when they make Clovis their home, we have a way to make sure they know the history of where they have chosen to live. And so I was very, very excited about that book and am enjoying it. I haven't gotten to the Miss Winkles part yet, or maybe I would have known that about David McDonald, but.
Sure, that was probably written before David McDonald.
It might have been.
I thought
2013, something.
Yeah, I think that might have been. So. It's probably time for another book.
See, yeah, so maybe that's in the commission. But so I thought that was just really exciting. And just on a personal note, I think probably most of us watched the Super Bowl yesterday, and I just thought that the national anthem, that part of the experience of the Super Bowl game was really incredibly moving yesterday. Chris Stapleton did it, and I thought he did a tremendous job, but I really loved all of the response to it that I saw on social media and that, because it was just that reminder of those things that genuinely bring us together and how valuable and important that is. And it was just such a refreshing thing to see people who were, again, genuinely celebrating this country and what it stands for, and I just thought that was fantastic.
Thanks. I thought the 4 women in the fighter pilots was pretty good. Fighter jets, I mean, it was pretty cool. Drew.
Thank you. I had an interesting conversation last week, with a gentleman in his late 80s. As everybody knows, my son was in the bar restaurant business, and about 7 years ago, he got a hold of me, told me that there was a gentleman in his mid-80s who was having difficulty getting his car smoked. So I hooked him with people at the Air District, and they were able to help him get his car smoked. During COVID, this conversation I had with him this week, during COVID, it was time for him to renew his driver's license, and he couldn't do it. They said, yeah, you can't come in, you can't do it by mail, how am I supposed to do it? We don't know. So he let his license expired, and he doesn't drive anymore. And he uses Clovis Roundup at least 5 days a week. And what he said to me, and this is what he said, it has saved my life. He said, I get out of the house 3 hours a day. They drop me off. I have lunch. I chat with people. I have a cocktail. They pick me up. I go home. And he said it twice during the conversation. It has saved my life. So the little things that we do in the lives of, and not we do, you do as staff, in the lives of everyday citizens is a big deal. And it may seem like, you know, sometimes you see a bus going by and there are 2 people on it. And now they don't even have to pay to use Clovis Transit. So hopefully we can, you know, we can make that work a little more efficiently, but it definitely has an effect on people's lives that we don't know until we actually have conversations with folks. That's all I have.
That's so beautiful. Chad, I think we should invite this gentleman to the mayor's breakfast. The focus of this year's mayor's breakfast are the small things that make Clovis Clovis. That's a small thing that made a huge difference in that person's life. Yeah. Thanks, Drew, for sharing that. Can you find them again? Mm-hmm. Okay. Paul.
Okay. Happy birthday, Drew.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thanks. Better say that now.
Pie, those little cake things back there. I'm so glad it's your birthday.
Went to the Blossom Trail ribbon cutting, and so it was on Friday. So to all the residents, please, and just people listening, it's a beautiful thing, just the ag community and all that is still out there. We feed the nation and the world practically. And so please go out, see all the blooms or blossoms that are happening now. Also, I went to the Japanese Citizens League Day of Remembrance. Tom Wright was also there with trustee Debbie Ikeda from State Center Community College. And in speaking with them, you know, the Japanese families in Clovis have left such great traditions back to historical. They actually said, and I saw it in the movie, I forgot the name of the movie again, but we, the city, passed a resolution supporting the Japanese families, and many of the Caucasian families help take care of their Japanese neighbors. And I'm putting it on John, go find that resolution, because that is something in which they think, it's in the book? Okay, and so we need to go find it, and we need to get it, and then somehow put it someplace so that we remember how great the people who came before us were thinking before any of us were here, and all these rumors and perceptions that they had. I mean, goodness, we were great back then when people least expected it. So I was just touched and moved by it. And I know that we have something on the trail remembering, I think, that family. And so it was just a great event. I've been riding the trail more, and so, you know,
trying to get your numbers up, huh?
I finally saw that I don't go that far. I'm in the southeast, so we don't have a counter. But a lot of the lights are out, and so I don't know when we go out, but I'm sure we're going to go and do that whenever it's done. But you know the reflectors that certain light posts have at the corners? If we can get that on a lot of the intersections on every light post, those are helpful at night, especially if you're biking so you can see it. And then also put those reflectors on the cement posts that when you see it, you can kind of go, okay, there it is, that's where the trail continues. And so if we get those reflect, I think it's a tape, right? And so put that on all the posts, that is so helpful. The trails are very clean, and so I want to commend the staff. The trails are very clean. But when I rode the Old Town Trail to where it ended, because I wanted to show my son, you don't cross that. No. Yeah, you stay on this side. But anyway, our rec center needs lights. It's dark there. It's hard to see when you turn in, and even the parking lot. I don't know the future plans, and I know that we put better lights already on the building where it shines, but it doesn't get to where people are parking. And I know this is always just funding, but I don't know if there's anything to help improve the lights, so that way when people drive, they actually can see people in the parking lot and see that, there's a lot of great programs going there, because it's full every night when I drive by. The people are using it, and it's an amenity, and people I think they forget. And so that, and also, I know signage will cost more, but an actual sign that says Clovis Rec Center someplace wherever we own, that would be helpful. And then I guess my last one is Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. A couple of things one thing I forgot to say last time from COG, and Renee, you probably know this, but there is an additional $2.7 million in TOD funding that became available, and the due date is February 28th. So you know that? Yeah, we have staff that. Okay. So I think it was a project, I think it was the city of Fresno that they didn't use or decided not to use, so they put the money back in the pot. So anyway, in case we had a TOD project, I think it was February 28th it was due, so I wanted to just make sure I mentioned that. I also want to say this, Dr. Armstrong, our meetings are just better because you're here. So here's another idea for you. I went on Friday night to the graduation of the Workforce Investment Board's forestry program, CORE, and they take the most amazing young people and put them through a 16-week, I think, training program to become future employees of CAL FIRE and forestry. And their partner is with Reedley College, but it makes me wonder if there's an opportunity to also link to the city, to Clovis community, because I was talking to this woman right here who would like to give her card to Scott or John or someone to give her a call. But I said, well, do you have like an urban forestry program? Because we have miles and miles of trails and lots of trees. And she said, we would love to develop an urban forestry focus. So the kids in the program now are really the Sierras and cutting down all those trees. But I think it might be interesting to talk to them and partner with Clovis community on a forestry program, urban forestry. Could help with parks, trail maintenance, planting trees in a city, which I think would be kind of a different focus. So I want to give this card to somebody. Yay, bingo, yes, yours. She was delightful, but I was so impressed with the program and the funding and the kids that went through it. It's like that, gentlemen. I mean, they changed these kids' lives in amazing ways. A young man in particular became homeless during the program. His cohort kind of wrapped around him, got him through it, graduated. It was remarkable. So anyway, but I think an urban forestry program in partnership with Clovis Community College could be super cool and give us some trail support. So anyway, I wanted to mention that as well. And I think that is all. I will also be attending Officer Crosco's funeral on Thursday, certainly to lift up his family, but mostly to lift up our police force. So I know you all will be there in force, so I think we'll be there. Some of us will be there, so anyway. And that is all I have, and happy Valentine's Day. Oh yeah, that too. All right, we are now going to go into closed session. The item on our the agenda, as you see, is continuing discussion on the claims for the Sunnyside Avenue water main break. Scott, will there be any action?
There will be no action tonight. We're not asking for any action.
All right, thank you.